Welcome to Getting the Most Out of Montages for qEEG with Dr. Walker. She will be uh, teaching us a little bit about montages. The video presentation will be uploaded to the Successful Practitioner website after it's been processed, so you'll be able to see it again there. A little bit about our presenter today. Dr. Walker has been active as a professional counselor for 30 plus years and as a psychophysiologist for the past 25 years. She has worked with a broad cross-section of clients, from individuals desiring to optimize performance to those with chronic illnesses, mental health concerns, and learning and attentional disorders. Oh yeah, she takes an integrative approach to therapy, combining qEEG assessment, neurofeedback, neuromodulation, biofeedback, and psychotherapeutic modalities. As such, she holds certifications in qEEG, neurofeedback, and biofeedback. In the field of psychophysiology, Linda provides mentoring and consultation services for qEEG, as well as neurofeedback, general biofeedback, and heart rate variability training. She has contributed to several research projects involving qEEG, neurofeedback, and heart rate variability biofeedback. In addition, she actively teaches workshops and provides online instruction, both nationally and internationally. She has also developed software and informed best practice in psychophysiology. Linda continues to maintain a small private practice in Traverse City, Michigan, in addition to her teaching and mentoring activities. So thank you for being here, Dr. Walker, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate being here. So I'm going to just kind of jump in here. And, you know, this is kind of one of those ultra boring topics. This is kind of the kind of stuff that I would have looked at in a webinar and were like, who on earth wants to pay attention to montages? Oh, God. But the truth is, it was kind of cool when I started playing with this and starting working with montages. And I found that I was just feeling a little bit like a qEEG sleuth a bit. Let's see. Can you see my screen here? You should see a PowerPoint now.
It looks good, yes.
Okay, cool. So you'll notice there's only about 7 slides here, and that's because you can talk to someone about montages until you're blue in the face, but it's really helpful just to kind of see it. So I'm going to spend less time talking and more time showing here. But I do need to give you just a little bit of a kind of an introduction, a way in before some of this is going to make have any clarity or make sense. Montages to me were kind of just ultra boring. It's like geek stuff, right? But as I started to learn how to use them, I got pretty excited because I could start to come and understand things about my clients that I would totally miss the maps, totally miss the maps. And I developed some techniques to be able to strengthen my neurofeedback protocols because I could see what I needed to do with neurofeedback a little bit better. And so I hope to share that with you today. As such, I'm going to be really careful about trying not to get lost in the weeds too much. I'm going to show you some data, and we're not really going to talk too much about case studies and protocols, but I want you to start to make sense of montages. Like, why would it matter? And seeing is kind of the believing piece of it. And so that's kind of our goal today. So I might not talk too much about montages, or protocols, but you'll hopefully be able to see and think about what you consider for a montage for not only analysis, but also for training. Now, we've got to start with a little bit of a word from our differential amplifiers. So it's really important to understand what on earth what does it mean, differential amplifier? Well, before we start talking about amplifiers, let's back up just a tad. When we do a functional MRI, we see an image of something on the screen that is tangible in there. And it's going to be there tomorrow, hopefully, when I do the MRI as well. And if we chose to, we could put our hands on it. We could touch it if we, had a desire to open the person up. But EEG is a little different. It's functional. It's always changing. As Jay Gunkelman likes to say, there's no ground beneath our feet here. So it's responsive to many things, which is a great thing because that's how we survive. If it wasn't responsive, we would have a big problem, but that makes it complicated. So those squiggly lines that we call EEG, those are the difference in potential energy of the neurons that are recorded at two individual electrodes. And both electrodes in a differential amplifier can also not only see what's collected in the difference of potential energy between these two sites, they can see everything else. And because it's differential, they can subtract that. I'm going to unpack that a little bit on the next screen. So by contrast, if you just look at the electrical output on somebody's head, even if I'm really close together, let's say C3 and P3, even if those electrodes are really close together, they're never going to be quite identical unless you accidentally get connected by a salt bridge. So let's talk about the differential amplifier a little bit more. It's really helpful because what's common in both electrodes can be separated out. So we put an EEG cap on someone's head, and what's common in both electrodes is I'm sitting in an office and the light's shining down on me. It's being picked up in this electrode and that electrode, and there it is. But because of that common mode rejection, we can subtract it out and it leaves us with only brainwaves, which is really kind of exciting. And here's an example right here. I've got my little input 1 and input 2. If we pretended that input 1 was right here at, say, F3, and input 2 is my ear reference, which presumably is quiet and not electrically active, then what we would have after we subtracted the light is our EEG. Bingo. But it gets better from that, actually. I mean, that's nice, but that's not what I exactly came here to tell you guys tonight. Let's look a little bit further here. All right. This is what really started me getting excited about montages. You guys remember those like whodunit books? Like you would get this little mystery book and you'd have a little summary of, so and so went to the store and bought ice cream, but Johnny didn't go. And then there was this big mystery that happened, and you get all these little clues in this narrative. And then you've got to figure out in this narrative what just happened. And they would give you this little grid to solve, this little crosswalk grid, and you'd start looking at the clues and checking them out, and you'd compare what Johnny was doing to what Jane is doing, and eventually if you checked enough stuff off, you would come out with this answer. It's like, oh, by process of elimination, I got it. Montages are the same way, and that's why they really excite me. I think because I got into the whodunit games when I was a kid, uh, whether that's good or bad. So back to montages. Our montages are based on the International 1020 system in neurofeedback world, or the 1010 system, which is just more channels. And we can use those groupings and comparisons to isolate sources in the EEG. That's the whodunit. We can use those montages actually even to amplify a specific pattern that we want to train. So I can figure out, okay, there's a behavior in the EEG. How do I get to it? And we can use our montages to promote better communication between neuronal assemblies. So a few basics. I'm going to keep it super basic. There are a lot of montages that we can use in EEG world. None of them are perfect, and they all have limitations, which is why you need to use more than one, and usually several every time you unpack an EEG. Unfortunately, most of our automated reports don't. And so they give you kind of a sense of what's going on, but if you really want to be efficient with your client and get it right, it helps to really kind of unpack this yourself and know a little bit about montages, and be willing to, kind of brave the forest of wavy lines, so to speak, and unpack it a bit. So I'm going to really kind of limit my talk to really about 4 basic montages. There are a whole lot more, and we're going to actually kind of dive into making more of those montages. The linked ears montage is the one that we see often in our recordings. In fact, it's typically the one we use to record. And that's important because our EEG databases, our normative databases, are all based on a linked ears montage. So you should start there. You can always remontage and change it out of that, but you should always start with the linked ears montage, even though I never, ever edit or analyze in a linked ears montage, because beyond recording, it's pretty terrible. Just saying. So the one thing that linked ears can do is, let's just say that I have a little seizure discharge right here, right beside this little ear electrode right here. Well, that ear electrode picks it up and it shares it with this other one over here. And then when you see the EEG record, what you're going to see is you're going to see just like blob all over the heads, like big wavy discharges. And you've got to kind of stop and go, well, where is it really? Because those linked ears are not going to tell you. Plus, they're really susceptible to cable sway. I see countless times bad wires in those electrodes. Sometimes people will accidentally put on a different electrode that's of a different metal than their recording cap. Big problem, can't do it. Or, oh gosh, she left her earrings on, they're gold earrings, and my little recording electrode is bumping right up against it that's tin, but she's got gold earrings. Problem. You don't get any EEG brainwaves at all out of that. So linked ears has its problems, and even when you're recording in it, you've got to police it and make sure that you're getting the best recording that you can. Sometimes I have people stop and pause their recording after about a minute and put it in a different montage so that we can make sure that everything is good before they continue their recording. And yeah, it's a pain and it takes time, but it's a whole lot easier and better than having to go back and re-record the entire thing. So that's your linked ears. Everything is compared to the average of the content in the linked ears, the entirety of the head. Laplacian's a little bit different. This is the one right down here. And Laplacian montages are, to me, probably one of the most helpful montages for editing, because it makes the EEG look incredibly dirty. And you're like, well, how's that helpful? If I know what's incredibly dirty, I can also much more easily discern what's incredibly clean. And that way I have less odds of accidentally inserting dirty EEG into my data, which is going to get inserted into my maps. And if I'm using an automated system, might get inserted into the protocols. And I might be doing something that's just completely not relevant to my client. Most of the time, not, but I've seen instances in which the EEG recommendations that came back, because there were problems in the EEG, were completely not based on a human brainwave, but the recommendations in the report made recommendations and the client trained the person based on a non-human brainwave recommendation that had absolutely nothing to do with them. It happens. Fortunately, I want to say, or I like to think, it doesn't happen as much as I observe it, but I don't have any statistics on that. But let's talk about Laplacian. The reason it brings all of the nasty stuff out is because for one electrode, whatever it is, in this case CZ, it's compared only to the average of all of the electrodes behind it, which means that for CZ in this case, if the average of everything around it is subtracted, it's going to leave for CZ what is absolutely unique to CZ. And it really pops out. I can see it. Wow, I can do something about it now. And I even almost know where it may be coming from. Laplacian's got a little issues or two, and you've got to kind of be aware of this. If you're looking at a temporal finding, notice that you don't have quite as many electrodes surrounding it to compare it with. So that average is going to be a weaker average than, let's say, FZ or CZ or PZ. That's okay. We have other montages that can make up for that, but we can sure get a lot of information to pop out of that Laplacian montage. Average reference is great. This is an example of an average reference right down here. And it's the diagram, I apologize, is a little bit misleading. So you have all of the sites recorded on the scalp and averaged together. And then you have each individual site compared to that average. It's better than a linked ears montage because at least you lop off the ear reference recording. And so all you have to look at is brainwave compared to brainwave. But it's still going to give you kind of a diffuse finding. And you know that situation in the classroom when you have a lot of kids, and let's just say that most of your kids are like 5'5", but then you've got this really, really tall kid. Maybe he's like 7'5". He just totally stands out head and shoulders above the rest. Well, in an average reference montage, that 7.5-foot kid is going to really skew your average. And it's going to make all those 5'5" kids on average, when you compare it to them, look a little bit taller than they actually are. So if you got a tall kid in the classroom, the average reference is probably not going to be the best view of things. So that's when I say large focal activity may show everywhere. That's the tall kid in the classroom. The other one that we talk about a lot is called a sequential or bipolar montage. And some people like to call it a sequential montage rather than a bipolar, because we just kind of want to be a little careful not to mistake that with the disorder, the bipolar disorder. And so that's kind of why some people are defaulting towards sequential. But what it does is it's going to compare one electrode to the next electrode to the next electrode. So it's just kind of a comparison of electrode pairs, and they typically are close together. This is one that sometimes is commonly called a double banana. You kind of see the little yellow bananas here on each side. But we can also compare things across. So we can do longitudinally, or we can do longitude or transverse. So this is longitudinal front to back, transverse is side to side, and you can do longitudinal transverse as well. So you can do a lot of different comparisons there. And when you put these four montages together, particularly the Laplacian average reference and a longitudinal bipolar, you can really start to be a detective here and start to sort out what's happening and where. I put this in because I think that it helps people understand in a very visual way what I'm about ready to show you with real examples. And I want to be very, very clear here. This is not my drawing. This came from the book Treatment of Epilepsy, Principles and Practice. And the authors were Burgess and Kalura. And if you notice, one of those sounds kind of familiar, Tom Kalura. He has been a software developer, hardware developer, and an engineer in our field for a very long time, and a neurofeedback practitioner. So just to make sure that we're kind of wrapped around the whole subtraction idea before we dive a little deeper, I'm just going to throw it out here. So if I have two lines that are absolutely identical and they're subtracted from each other, I get a flat line. Okay, that's great, Linda. It's a flat line to begin with. All right, let's go to the next one. A little easier. These two guys on number 2 are identical as well, but they've got some activity to it. But when I subtract one from the other, they look, if I were to put one on top of the other, they would look identical. Flat line, nothing. So in the first case, we have 0 minus 0 equals nothing. In the second case, we have 1 minus 1 equals nothing. All right, cool. What about going on here? You've got some kind of interesting little feature in output 1, and you've got a little different feature in output 2, but they look relatively similar because each of them have this little feature here that's in common. The common feature is going to get subtracted out, and I'm only going to be left with this little guy right here. And there he is. Oh, that's kind of cool. Okay, next one. This one doesn't have anything in it at all. This guy has a little downward deflection. Curiously enough, when I subtract that one out, it's a difference, remember? So the difference of this would be that. So it flips it up. Kind of a weird thing, but it does. So I hope that you're kind of getting the idea of how this subtraction works when we're talking about lines of EEG. That's gonna help as we kind of start to talk about kind of some of those real world examples here. And so let's just dive in. All right, I'm going to stop share for just a quick second and come up on my other software here.
Uh, oh, sorry. I probably
Yep.
shouldn't interrupt. But in the meantime, is there a reason why it's taking kind of like the absolute value of that little squiggle, or no?
Ah, okay. So yeah, that's an exaggerated drawing. If it's picking up the absolute value of that little squiggle, that's because it's being compared to something that's zero. If the other squiggle
Okay.
had just a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of content in it, it would be a little bit less attenuated. And that's a really
Uh,
good,
that makes sense. Okay,
yeah.
sorry. I won't interrupt again.
No, you're fine. Not a worry. All right, so let's just start here. I'm going to use a couple of different software examples today. Oh, I better share my screen again. Sorry. Here we go. All right, and away we go. I'm going to use a few little software examples because they have some different interesting features in them. Let's start out with some WinEEG stuff. And again, I'm kind of software non-denominational. I like to kind of play with all of them, and they're all very good in a lot of ways. Just like the montages, they have pluses and minuses. So that's why I like to use all of them. So let's just start with this case right here. There's a lot of alpha in this. This is an eyes closed record, but even in an eyes closed record, there's a fair bit of alpha. And I'm going to just start by montaging this to what my recording reference would be. It's not looking like that. I've got to redo my filters. There we go. And so we look at this. Alpha is smeared all over the place. I've got alpha all the way up into the frontal area. You can see here. I've got alpha down here. I can actually, even in my linked ears referential montage, I can discern some things here. That's great. Let's run this to an average reference. Remember, I said average reference and linked ears, they're somewhat similar in that they're going to give me kind of a global perspective. Here's my average reference. And again, I've got to refilter a bit. And one of the things I like about WinEEG is when we're comparing electrode sites and I want to see if I've got activity that's similar to another, I could easily do that by just dragging some things around here. So here's O1, and I'm gonna run it up here to T5. And I can see right here, O1 and T5 are just almost identical. Let me turn up the gain here so we can see this a little bit better. Or turn down the gain actually. So O1 and T5. So these are super similar. And that makes some sense. They are very close together. They're not, just like we said earlier, they're not exactly alike, but they are so similar. It's almost crazy. All right. O1 and T5. So that's interesting. All right. And I can see that, let's say C4 here, C4 and T5, well, they look quite different. And so one of the benefits of this particular software, C4 and T4 look the same though, almost the same. One of the benefits of this software is that I can see where things are different. Okay, let's pop it into some different montages here and see what we come up with. Let's go to our bipolar montage. Bipolar montages are interesting in that I can compare, this is what it looks like when I compare one electrode set to another. So for instance, you'll see up here, I have FP2 to F8, I have F8 to T4, I do T4 to T6. So you can kind of see how they're compared to each other. And we can kind of see that it changes the view of things. That's okay. Don't get intimidated. What I can be able to do though is I can start to compare one electrode set to another. And if I have something really extreme in the electrode set pop up, I can start to see phase reversals. And I don't know if I have any in this record, but we'll just kind of run through and have a look really quickly. And so here, I want to make my scale so that I can see the lines clearly. If it's all jammed together, I can't see anything. So I'm going to kind of spread it out just a little bit, give it a little space and room to breathe. But I don't want it so spread out that I can't see those possible phase reversals. Now, this individual is just kind of a relatively healthy individual, a little adult ADHD, very creative. So there's a ton of alpha in here, not concerned about it. And there's no complaint of discharges. So I can see if there's phase reversals here. Why a phase reversal? If there was some kind of weird, funky discharge, I could possibly see that. And I'm going to show you one here right after this that has one. So I don't think we'll have any in here. So I'm going to move on to the one I know has. All right. So a little messy EEG recorded in linked ears montage. And this one was recorded by a colleague of mine. And she called me up after. She's like, I think something's wrong with my amplifier. Got all this stuff all over the place. And Linda, I swear to you, this little girl wasn't moving at all. And then I start to see things like this right here. And it's way off the chart. But I'm thinking, okay. If you're accustomed to seeing spike and waves in the EEG, you probably already figured out what was happening. But if you're still trying to learn how to identify it, you can kind of almost think, oh, my wires are going all over the place. Something's happening with my amplifier. We have a lot of electrode pop, except that when you get to this right here, and everything's kind of, there's what we call rhythmicity to it. All right. Well, that's not great. Let's have a look at that. Let's unpack it. So I kind of had to say, I don't think there's anything wrong with your amplifier, but we've got to have a good look at this. So I'm going to take it out of linked ears montage first. Let's go to average reference. Well, when I scale it properly with my average reference, I kind of can tell already that it doesn't take much for my, I don't need spectacles to see that there's a big problem here. And it's not the amplifier. What you've got is an example, pretty classic example of a triphasic spike and wave. So you've got your downward spike and a little slow follower. You see that spike and wave? So I kind of said to myself, I wonder where that's coming from. I guess I should give you a spoiler alert and say this was not an uncomplicated case. All right, so we're going to go down to longitudinal bipolar. And we're going to see some phase effects here. All right, so now when I'm using longitudinal bipolar, not in the other montages, but longitudinal bipolar, I can start to look at phase reversals. Here's an example right here. You see where these guys are pointing to each other? When I get this kind of phase reversal, I go back over here and I look at my electrode pairs and I say, T3 is the common electrode here. Guess what? T3 is the kind of the naughty kid in the classroom right now. It's making that big spike and wave. And you'll notice as you look through this record, T3 is not the only rogue player here. There are several, and they did not spell, I'm sad to say, not a good outcome for this youngster. But her parents were kind enough to allow us to use this as teaching so that other professionals could be able to learn how to spot this stuff and get kids to interventions faster. This is an intervention that required well beyond a neurofeedback intervention. This required a neurologist. And this youngster was already 6 years old and had had these for a while. The parents brought her in because she was having trouble learning how to read. And she's having absence discharges. So she's not having a grand mal here. It's an absence. She's sitting completely still in the chair, and this is what comes out. So I can start to use my EEG to find those problem areas, those deregulated areas. Now, I'm not a neurologist and I'm not practicing as a neurologist, so I'm not identifying or localizing for purposes of treatment whatsoever. But if I start to notice some areas that are problematic and I can kind of drill down to where they're generally coming from, maybe if I can utilize neurofeedback to stabilize that area, the individual might have some benefit. And that's what happens often in cases of epilepsy. Keeping in mind, we are not treating epilepsy. We're just training the brain in that area so the person can learn how to operate their brain. All right, let's have a look at another one here. This is where things get kind of fun in my mind. Let's go back to our WinEEG. Let's have a look at this one. All righty. Right off the bat, there's some interesting things in this EEG. I can see these cute little spindles. Let me just remontage this because I have a different one up here. Let's go to, see if I can go here. So I took it out of my average reference montage to an average weighted montage, which is somewhat similar to a Laplacian montage. And I can kind of look at it this way. All right, cool. That's nice. F8, FZ, F3, F7, FP2, FP1. That's interesting. Frontal beta spindles. Well, let's just kind of run through the record and see what we see. Oh, there they are again. Oh, F4 and F8. That's kind of interesting. But I still can't ignore that there are other sites showing up the party. F7 is definitely showing up the party here. And if I go through this enough, I'm going to see F7 show up a little bit more at the party. There. This is just this one right here. This is just an F7. Frontotemporal beta spindles. Well, that's kind of interesting. Just to kind of talk a little bit about what this client was experiencing, this is an 8-year-old boy. When they're not happening all the time, there's another one, F7. You know, if I map this, they're probably not going to make a big impression on my map. Oh, there's some muscle tension. So we have to get rid of the muscle tension. And we've got some slow. Here's some more over here. This has not been artifacted, by the way. But I'm just noticing where they're showing up. That's an interesting one. This looks like it could be a curious finding, like a 3 per second absence. Interestingly enough, we had a neurologist who is probably the best pediatric neurologist of the nation look at this. And, you know, because I said, are you sure that's not something? And he said, you know, it's funny what people do with their eyes every so often. And this is an 8-year-old boy, and he kind of likes to see what things happen. So he messes with the equipment all the time. And there you go. You had a little boy that was kind of blinky his eyes. But the spindles are legitimate. And those were creating some problems for him. Now, when we see spindles like that, and it's not due to medication, we can sometimes see people who are really reactive. And when they happen in the temporal areas, they can get reactive and cranky. And when they happen in the right temporal areas, sometimes they can get downright angry and violent. And this kiddo, when he got agitated, he was explosive. And it was bad enough that his biological parents were trying to figure out how to send him somewhere out of here because it was too much on them, too much chaos in the home, which is unfortunate for this young man. So neurofeedback was a way that we were going to start working with him. Here's another one at F7. So if I just kind of page through here, I'm seeing them bilaterally. The F8 ones that I showed you at first were well formed, but I'm seeing it in other areas as well. I'm going to just take a little drift out of this here. We won't take the sway out of it, but it just straightens it up so we can look at it for a minute. And so I'm just kind of wondering, that's nice and fine. I can see it there. Is it really there? Well, let's go find one of those spindles again and go to that bipolar montage or sequential montage. Have a look. I get one that I feel like is not polluted with muscle tension. Here's a good one right here, right? My bipolar. All right, so what do we have here? If I look at my bipolar montage, here's my distinct spindle. There's a hint of one right here. And my common electrode is F7. So I know it's F7. Not like I couldn't have seen that with my eyes, but I still need to know how I'm going to address that. So I've got F7 and I've got F8 and I saw F3 and I saw F4 and I saw FC. Am I going to do neurofeedback at all those sites? Do the parents have enough patience and time to wait for me to go through a neurofeedback protocol at all those sites, assuming that I'm doing traditional neurofeedback? Let's go to average reference. All right, here we go again. All right, there they are. I can see them now really clearly in F8 and F7. Now, I'm going to kind of give something away because I've already remontaged this and I put a few extras in, but let me show you how I did that because those extras are going to be really important, but we need to back out of that and show you what it looked like to begin with. I'll show you how to do this in NeuroGuide and WinEEG so you can make your own montages. And making my own montage, what I was trying to do is say, how can I get at that? This is a behavior. The brain's making it. How do I isolate it and spot it enough that I can stick some neurofeedback electrodes on and be very efficient and direct in my training? That's my goal. All right, so let's go to setup. I'm going to go to montage list and modify. First of all, let's take out those extra electrodes so that you can see what it would look like without. Apply, okay, okay. Then I'm going to remontage so they go away. And I'm actually on this one just so we can get a good spectral display. So now they're not there down here. And I can actually do my little draggy thing. I can drag to F7 and F8. And this is going to be important with my protocol soon too. I see they're there. I'm going to quick run an artifacts correction. And yes, I recognize that in some circles, artifact correction is sometimes highly contentious. Let me do that again. Artifact correction. And so what I don't want to do today is debate that, but know that it's a tool that in some softwares you can utilize, not others, but some you can. WinEEG happens to be one. And I'm just doing a very quick and hopefully very dirty, well, not so dirty correction. Mainly, I just want to take some of the saccadic eye movements out. That looks a little bit better. Okay, now we can see things a little bit better. And I'm going to run an analysis so I can see a spectral display of the full file. Again, there's some, this is a dirty clean. That's curious. My electrodes still showed up at the party down there. All right, let's do this. Entire. All right, I'm going to fill by band ranges here. All right, so I want to draw your attention to the average reference version of F8 right here and F7. This is average reference. And if I kind of look at it there, even if I turn this up a little bit, that beta spindle doesn't make too big of an impression on me. It's right here. That's the space it is. But my bigger question is, okay, I want to train that. How can I best and most efficiently train that? Am I going to do a 2-channel montage like an F7 and F8 reference to linked ears? Am I going to do a montage where I train F7 minus F8? Am I going to do one where I train F7 and F8 reference to CZ? What's going to catch that? So let's have a look at that. First of all, I've got to change my montage to look at those montages in the spectral display. So I'm going to go back to my montage list. I'm going to go back to my average reference. I'm going to modify it. And I'm going to put these sites back in. So here, I'm going to go F7, where are you? Reference to F8, and turn it on. I'm going to go F8 to a referential montage, or F. I'm going to go F7 to that referential montage. Where are you? There we go. F. So it's a little tedious. And then I'm going to go, let's go F7 to CZ and F7 to, or F8 to CZ. This is F8 to CZ. Where are you? There, F8 to CZ. All right, so the question I'm trying to ask here is, what's my best training montage going to be? And I'm going to delete that one. There we go, and apply. Okay, and okay. And by the way, if you do this and WinEEG, you need to go back and uncheck and delete those electrodes, or you're going to have the little mess up that I just had, where you're going to get a bunch of stuff showing up at the party when you're trying to do your analysis on somebody else and they're going to be there. So let's go entire file. And let's fill by band ranges. All right. And then let's bring this down so we can have a look at it here. And this has really become kind of messy, hasn't it? All right, so that is weird. I've never had this behave quite like that. Let's go back and see what is going on here. So sometimes, for whatever reason, I don't know why it is, but WinEEG can just get a kind of a little bit of a mind. There it goes. Now it's going to go. Can get a little bit of a mind of its own. And this is the brand new version of it. And I think maybe there's still a couple of little things that need to get worked out. Now, okay, we've got this now. Fill by band ranges. All right. At the bottom, let's look and see what we've got. Keeping in mind that I've got to have amplitude to train. All right. So if I do F8, turn this gain up a little bit. Turn my gain up right up here so we can see this stuff. There. Pull it up. What I think I want to train here is I think I want to train those beta spindles down, but I got to capture them because they're fast and they're low amplitude. Well, let's see here. Okay. Here is F8 reference to F7 and F8 reference to CZ right here. I've got a little bit of amplitude to train. There's not much to track down. F7 and F8 reference to a referential montage, like a linked ears montage. I can see the detail of that little spindle, but there's not a lot of amplitude to train. Okay. Well, this was an unusual one. F7 minus F8. Wow, look at that amplitude. I can train that. I can get my filters on that, and I have a discernible amplitude to train, and I can do neurofeedback with that. And furthermore, I can decide what my training filters are if I want to bracket it. I'm probably going to be training somewhere between 21 hertz. So I put my mouse crosshairs where the peak ends, and I put it where the other peak ends, and I look at my filter settings, which are actually going to pop up right down here. So watch down here when I move my mouse crosshairs. There's my 2021 there, all the way up to about 27 hertz. So I've dialed in that filter. I've made it specific to my client, and I have caught that behavior. So if you think about this as kids in the classroom making noise, you ever seen the little game where everyone's like, like they're all, you send someone out of the room and someone does something that's kind of funny and they misbehave and they have to kind of like sit and be quiet before someone can turn around and catch them. Well, here I've caught the behavior. In these other montages, not so much. Let's quick look at a quick case in NeuroGuide. I know we're kind of getting a little late in time. One more thing before I do, though. There's one more fine detail I need to make about this one. The problem with bipolar, sequential, and particularly intrahemispheric training is that if you have two sites that are almost identical, there's nothing that you're going to be able to train there. Remember the alpha case where I could drag, I could drag this one right here. I can drag one site on top of the other, and we can see that they're similar. Like this one, they cancel each other out. Remember my drawing, then I'm not going to be able to do much with that one. This case, by contrast, I've got two similar findings, and I'm going to go find that little one of my classic spindles right here. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take F7. Let's turn this volume up a little bit. If I put that F7 down on top of F8, these guys are not the same. They're out of phase. They're different. So they don't cancel each other out. And I can train both of them. You can actually see it over here to Epoch 469. There's a little bit easier one to look at. Boom. So that's kind of cool. Now I know they're out of phase. I can train them. I can capture the behavior at two different sites. I have a very simple neurofeedback montage. It's going to be efficient because I can catch the behavior all, and I don't have to do a lot of skipping around. I'm in business. And you can even see down here, here's my F7, F8 trace. It really pulls that content out even compared to my average reference. So I've got something I can wrap my EEG neurofeedback filters around. All right, let's do another one here. This is the same kiddo, F7, F8. We can see over here, this is a Laplacian montage, and I've already actually parsed it out over here. And I'll have one more to show you after this. So here's my frontal comparison here. Oh, I should show you how to do it. I'll show you the comparison and then show you how I got there. Okay. Frontal comparison. Oh, it's not going to be happy with me today. Of course, we're going to wait till we have a webinar.
Sometimes it happens that way.
Oh, of course. Okay, let me. I'm going to stop share here. I've got another one. We'll use it instead. Technology is just fantastic when it works. Not so much when it doesn't.
Really though, but I think this is also a good spot for me to tell them to like if you have questions, please
Type in.
send them in. So then Dr. Walker can kind of address them when we get to that point.
I'm going to quick show you this and hop off because I hope I've kind of given these are flybys, but hopefully it gives you a sense of things. Okay, this is a different individual. Their qEEG is this is an eyes open, and they are very anxious. They're hyper vigilant, and you can kind of see if I look even at my spectral display right over here in NeuroGuide. This is 0 hertz. This is 30 hertz. Their amplitude just keeps building up toward the beta. So this is just kind of a tightly wrapped, hypervigilant, anxious individual. It's what we would call a low voltage fast EEG. And I'll notice in this one, hey, there's some spindles at CZ. Wowie. Okay, this must be kind of an anxious, reactive person too. I kind of have to say, I think we're going to see a lot more of this in our world as we start to kind of dial into electronics and we don't get enough sleep and we don't do enough self-care and we stress ourselves out all the time. So how do I get at that? CZ linked ears? Okay, let's make our montage and just go find out. So the ways I would consider doing this, CZ linked ears would be a good guess. Sometimes there are some individuals in groups that will say, hey, if they're really anxious like that, maybe C3 minus C4 could be a calming protocol for them. What about that one? Okay. Well, I've got to calm this person down. So let's make our montage here and let's see what's gonna fit the best here. I'm gonna go to my montage and create. So I'm curious about a few things. I'm curious about CZ, reference to linked ears. So I'm going to click on both of those and you can see on my montage channel it goes in. I'm curious about C3 minus C4. So I'm going to click those guys too. Well, just for giggles, let's look at CZ minus PZ while we're at it. Maybe that's a good one. Okay. Or yeah, let's just start there. Those are good ones. And I'm just going to call this central. I got to give it a name. And the cool thing is, once I make these, and if you've kind of been looking at my montage list, you'll see there's a whole bunch of them over here. I can just go back to them and they can become my go-to. Let's remontage now. So I'm only going to be looking at 3 channels now. They're going to be my suspected training channels. And I'm going to need to kind of scale this just a tad bit. All righty. So here we go. What's my best training montage? I have CZ linked ears, C3 minus C4, and CZ minus PZ. And I'm going to draw your attention right over here. All right. So I can figure out, you're like, okay, well, then what's what now? Let's use our crosshairs. So the best training montage to catch that beta spindle is going to be where it's standing up heads and shoulders above the rest, right? So bring my crosshairs over here, and I'll bring your attention over to the left. CZ linked ears is the one where I'm catching that beta spindle the best. Well, what about C3, C4? So I'm going to click on C3, C4. That's the green one. Okay, in this particular example, that C3 minus C4 is going to be kind of meh. I mean, I'd even be better off training CZ minus PZ if I really want to capture this behavior. C3 minus C4 is just not really going to give me as much to train, and I'm not catching it as much. And so sometimes coming over here and dialing in these montages, by the way, I'll kind of draw your attention down here. Sometimes dialing in these montages can really help you fine tune, get a whole lot more efficient, and you're actually heads and shoulders above and beyond what you're going to get from an automated report. So you're going to do much better work with your client. So, okay, it's time for me to shut up and you to ask.
That was very helpful. I think it really puts into perspective as to like why the different montages are important versus just the one.
Yeah.
But we do have a question from Carla, and I think you kind of answered it a little bit, but she said, would you be able to generalize this protocol creation that isn't just spike wave activity such as high temporal alpha on both sides?
So yes, so what we just showed you were the beta spindles, and the high temporal alpha would work exactly the same way. What I really want to do is very much what I did with those spindles with the WinEEG case. If my high temporal alpha is in phased and matched, I'm not going to be able to catch it. If it's out of phase, I'm just going to bring up that one WinEEG again, just because I think it's easier to look at it when you're talking about it here. Okay, here we go, share. This is beta spindles bilaterally, F7, F8. This could just as easily have been alpha. And when I drag these guys together and do the subtraction, I can see they're not in phase. And I can see that when I run my spectral display, I've got a lot to capture. In this individual right here, see if I've still got my other one up here. In that individual with my alpha, can't get to it right now. Oh, for Pete's sake, there we go. There, this guy right here. Okay, let's go back to, let's go average rated here. In this case, that temporal alpha, he's got a lot of it, so this is probably a really good one to look at. Here's T5, here's T6. That is pretty, it's not identical. It's pretty close. If I were just to quick run a spectral on this, and I'll be quick about this, so forgive me, I'm always running late. This is just a quick spectral analysis. If I look at T5 and T6 here, we can see, boom, they look pretty similar. All right, well, let's just quick remontage this just for giggles to see what we would get if we put them together. And this is a good practical question because I actually hadn't unpacked this one yet. So setup, montage. I'm in the average weighted. I'm going to modify. And we are going to add one channel here. And I'm going to call it T5 minus T6. There we go. Apply. Okay. Okay. Let's close out of here. I remontage it so that it picks up that new channel. There it is down there. And then let's do our spectral again. And again, this is sloppy mapping, but the point is to really kind of look at the montage more than it is anything else. Hey, don't do that. Get back here. EEG spectra, entire. Okay. It does help if you select some data. Oh, well, here's an interesting one. Okay. Now, keep in mind, you've got to really make sure that you know what you're looking at here. Here's the regular T6 with your average weighted. Here's regular T5. They look pretty similar. The traces visually looked pretty similar, but here's T5, T6. Wow, we can train it. Okay, there's one caveat here. If you have a temporal lobe finding where you have one temporal lobe that has a whole lot of alpha and the other one doesn't, remember, you're training the difference between the two, and one of them might be healthy and the other isn't. Both or one, either or both can possibly change when you're referencing to each other. You want to be very careful not to make that unhealthy one. Well, you want to be very careful not to make that healthy one unhealthy because it changes in relation to the other. That's the caveat. In this case, we go back to that EEG finding, and it's bilaterally a finding, and so we're not going to, in this case, we're not going to have an issue with referencing that. But if I had one really healthy side and one not, I wouldn't want to go there because I don't want to risk making the healthy side unhealthy. So there you go. I hope that helps. All right.
Okay, it says, yeah, she said that's so helpful. I'm definitely going to return to old EEGs to review them in different montages.
Ah, cool.
Yes.
I'm glad.
Uh, would that be different? Well, I guess no, sorry, I answered my own question. I was like, if you had a TBI on the right side, your left side would probably be the healthy one and you probably
Yeah.
wouldn't have that activity. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
TBI, strokes, epilepsy. And so when people are doing those kinds of interhemispheric trainings, I always say, you know what? Don't just stick electrodes on and go because someone tells you to. Go measure it first to make sure it actually makes sense and it's a smart thing to do. So
But it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So
all
thank you so much, Dr.
yep.
Walker. Thank you everyone who made it in. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next month.
Take care. Look forward to it.